What's up, folks? Welcome back to the setup. I'm out here in the shop once again, chilling, and today we're gonna jump into a little more power fishing, man. A couple techniques that I haven't covered just yet, and I wanted to throw them together because I feel like they work in tandem, so to speak. So today we're gonna talk about the spinnerbait and the chatterbait, and I feel like the spinnerbait is the really old school, almost kind of forgotten power fishing bait because everybody's all about the chatterbait these days, which is understandable because it's a phenomenal bait and technique as well. So, you know, I can definitely understand that. But we're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to start with the old school, man. I'm going to go old school, a spinnerbait right here. This is something I feel like is underutilized in the bass fishing space right now, especially toward the top ranks. But it's one that I keep close to my heart, man. I haven't thrown it as much as I probably should, just because I too get caught up on the chatterbait. But the spinnerbait, man, has caught me a lot of giant fish, a lot of fish in general, and it's just a great technique, very versatile, man. And I think it kind of gets overshadowed by the chatterbait. But let's talk about what I use when I'm fishing a spinnerbait. So first and foremost, let's talk about the rod, right? This is a very versatile rod. You guys have heard me talk about this rod before in this setup, but this is just a Pro Series right here, and it's a 7-foot medium heavy action. This is a rod that, you know, I consider a utility rod. I can throw a buzz bait on this rod. There's just so many different things I can throw with it, but a spinnerbait is also a part of that. So I'm not going to go into that. We're going to stick with the spinnerbait, but 7-foot medium heavy. So I like a little bit of tip on this rod, and I like a little bit of a shorter rod. Because oftentimes with the spinnerbait, I'm target fishing. I'm throwing at a laydown. I'm throwing at a dock. I'm throwing at a big boulder. I'm throwing at a bush. You know, you're very specifically fishing that spinnerbait, with the exception of smallmouth fishing where you're open water, things like that. When I'm largemouth fishing, it's almost always a specific target that I'm throwing at, a weed line, you know, whatever it is. So therefore, you need to be able to make very accurate casts. With a 7-foot rod, it's very easy for me to do a forward and a backhanded roll cast, which are very accurate casts, and I can place my bait. When spinnerbait fishing, I feel like that's probably the most important thing, being able to place the bait. If you can't place the bait right where it needs to be, oftentimes you're going to miss the strike and you're not even going to catch that fish. And so casting is really, really a big deal when it comes to spinnerbait fishing, and being able to place that bait, in my opinion, is a big deal. Another thing, because we're target fishing, right? We're fishing very specific pieces of cover. This is not a technique where you want to go light on your line, okay? I start with 17, and that's somewhat light. But more times than not, I'm throwing 20, and in some cases, I'm throwing 25. And it's not necessarily because I'm fishing for 7, 8, 9, 10-pound bass. If you get a 2-pounder and he gets you around a root ball that has 4, 5, 6, 10 different roots going all over the place, you're going to lose them. And oftentimes you're going to get broke off. And so I know if I tie a 25-pound test on, I tighten that drag all the way down. When I get that 2-pound bite, which is critical in a lot of tournaments for me, I can turn that fish. I can get him away from that cover very, very quickly and into the boat. The main thing is getting a bite and then getting him away. And I mean within a hook set's notice. Okay, so you get the bite, you set the hook, and 1, 2 turns of that handle, you need that fish away from the cover. Otherwise, it's getting ready to be bad news. So that's why we really, really beef up the fluorocarbon in this particular scenario. And like I said, I'm throwing anywhere from 17 to 25. But almost always, I start with 20. But there are some cases where I like to go a little bit lighter, a little more open water scenarios, grass, things like that. I'll throw 17. And then I'm going 25 when I feel like the cover's really, really nasty or the fish are really big. The reel, a 6/8 to 1 gear ratio, Johnny Moore's Platinum reel, I think that's a good happy median. With the spinnerbait, I really wouldn't get into the higher gear ratios. I would keep it around 6, maybe even 7, but I think 8 would be a little bit fast for a spinnerbait. I'm sure there are guys that throw that on that, but this is just my personal opinion. So that's the spinnerbait pretty much in a nutshell. Great technique, old school technique. Needs to be thrown more, I think, even by myself. It's just something that we need to put in a rotation a little bit more. This is the new age. This is it. The vibrating jig. The what else do they call it? They got the vibrating jig, what else? They got so many different names. At the end of the day, it's just a chatterbait, man. Don't need to come with all these different names for it, man. It's just a chatterbait. But this thing right here, in my opinion, has taken the place of the spinnerbait in a lot of scenarios, man, because it's very efficient, it's easy to cast, it's just like a jig. You can skip it really good, so it works well around docks and overhanging trees. But the problem with this bad boy right here, he hates wood. When I say he hates wood, he has a wood phobia. This guy cannot stand wood. If you throw it near a limb, you're snagged, okay? You throw it near a dock pole, you're snagged. You can just count on it. And so that's where the spinnerbait outshines the chatterbait, in my opinion, is just coming through cover. But this thing is a phenomenal fish catcher, man, and you just can't beat it, man. Works a lot better in open water scenarios. You can cast it a lot further, and you can cover a lot more water, in my opinion, with the chatterbait. And it's a very dominant bait and a very dominant technique. It could be fished on the bottom. You can hop it. You can yo-yo it. It can be burned. It can be ripped out of grass. Just so many different ways you can fish it. Very versatile. You know, that's probably why most guys, including myself, we reach for this before we reach for a spinnerbait a lot of times. But let's jump into the setup on this. So I use a little bit of a longer rod because oftentimes it's more of an open water scenario. I'm covering a lot of water. I'm making very long casts. And so I'm going with a 7'2", and this is a medium heavy, favorite big sexy. In my opinion, that fish is more like a light medium heavy, or even almost like a medium. In my opinion, with the chatterbait, you don't want to overly stiff rod. It's easy to lose fish on this bait if you don't allow the fish to take the bait. Very, very easy. I've done it so many times. Easy to pull the bait away from fish because a lot of times they'll just mouth it. They don't necessarily hit it really hard. They just mouth it. And it feels really mushy, almost like, oh, I got like a leaf or some grass or something like that. And we don't realize that it's a bite, or we set the hook too hard and overly set, so to speak, and we lose those fish. So having a right rod is really important. So the medium action to a medium heavy, I think, is about perfect. You guys can see the bend on that. You definitely need some tip there because you are fishing an open hook, right? The reel, 6/8-1, once again, Johnny Morris Platinum Reel. And I like 17 pound on my chatterbait. And I'll sometimes go to 15. And that's for castability and just keeping that bait down in a water column. As you increase the line size, that bait has a tendency to want to rise. And a lot of times I'm really wanting to keep that bait down. And so, you know, 15, 17 tends to really keep that bait down where I want it. And then when I'm fishing shallower, I'll throw 20. And I'll rip it out of grass and that sort of a thing. You know, like when I'm up on Gunnersville or back home on the California Delta, places like that, the Potomac River, you can get real aggressive with this bait. You definitely want to throw 20-pound tests. And so that's pretty much it, man. These are the two power fishing techniques of the day. The spinnerbait and the chatterbait, two great techniques. Two techniques that really get it done, catch a lot of fish all over the country. And I think you guys will find a lot of success in it. If you have never thrown either one of these, highly recommend. So you guys drop me a comment. Let me know what you guys want to see next on the setup. We're gonna cover it all. Eventually, we're gonna have them all covered. Every technique that I use as I travel the country. Please hit me up with the questions, man. I appreciate all that in the comments. And I'll catch you guys on the water. See you.